Hello, you are watching the Nouvel Esprit video series on the theology of the body. In this video, dedicating we are dedicated to audience 22. We are your host. I am Jeremy Hossotter.
And I'm Guillermo Moreno.
So, to dive into this, we begin with this verse from Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, where Eve says, quote, "I have acquired a man," end quote. So we have previously talked about in audience 21, especially about how the procreative union, that one flesh union between the man and the woman, is defined as knowledge. And this knowledge is now something similar to when the first man went and named the animals. So in Genesis 2, we learned that Adam, the first man, went and he was sitting in the garden and all the animals are brought before him and he names them. And in that act of naming, he discovers how he is unlike all of the animals and that he is alone. This situation, JP2 called original solitude. Now, this statement of Genesis 4 where Eve says, "I've acquired a man," is a new situation of naming. It's similar to when Adam named the animals, but now we're naming the offspring. Here we see that the parents give the right name, man, to their child, the new man they have created through the conjugal union. So the name man, then it expresses this same humanity as them, that the offspring also Sharon. The naming of man of the offspring indicates that this new being is a new man with the same human nature, with the same humanity. And so this knowledge as the conjugal union is a kind of it's a type of taking possession of our humanity, and it's a possession through naming. And this possession through naming is different from the kind of possession man has over animals through his naming, because that possession of animals is we are exercising our authority as stewards, as a master over animals. And this falls under the command to subdue and rule the earth. The kind of possession through naming of the new child is a different kind of possession. Now, Guillermo, do you have anything you'd like to add here?
Yeah, something that dawned on me just now was we're talking about naming, of course, in a different way than providing someone a name that identifies this individual as this one specifically. So when Adam was naming the animals, he was calling this species dog, that species cat. It's not like he was calling them Fido or Fidette or something. So uh, here we're talking about naming in two different senses. On the one hand, uh, this is essentially this kind of being. And in this case, they realize, and I'm sure they knew, but in the act of naming and in the ability to and in that sense take possession of humanity, they're acknowledging this is uh uh this being is kind of a continuation of who we are. So they name man as such. We don't see that here they are naming either Cain or Abel, whichever it is. And I believe that Cain was the older one. I just wanted to point out that distinction when it comes to naming in terms of in terms of um, the being that something, or in this case, someone is, and the words that make up that identify this instance of this kind of being.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Guillermo. That's an important distinction to make as how are we naming them? We're
Hmm.
not just going through and naming this dog.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know. I just blanked on names. I guess Spike. I don't know. Terrible dog name. Apologize to any dogs named Spike.
I don't know
But
any.
I don't know. Maybe there is.
I'll bet.
So we do have this thing where like this concept of naming where you're naming a particular kind or a particular instance of a dog. Something like Fido or Spike or whatever. But what Adam is doing in the garden is naming the species dog, cat, lion, so on and so forth. It's a we can almost say it's a distinguishing of natures, dog nature, cat nature. And through this distinguishing of natures, Adam comes to the radical realization of how different his nature as person is. All right. So if this possession through naming is different from the animals, we have to figure out what that is. And so to the next slide. So we have this quote here. Would you like to read it, Guillermo?
Yeah. I quote, in this knowledge in which they give rise to a being similar to themselves, the man and the woman are carried off, as it were, both taken into possession by the very humanity, which they, in union and reciprocal knowledge, want to express anew and take possession of anew by drawing it from themselves, from the marvelous masculine and feminine maturity of their bodies, and in the end, through the whole sequence of human conceptions and generations from the beginning, from the very mystery of creation, end quote. That's Theology of the Body, audience 22, section 3.
Awesome. So this possession we are talking about, according to the text Guillermo has just read to us, is talking about how the first man and first woman, they are being taken into possession by their own humanity, that in this union, in this knowledge, that they want to take and express it anew. They want to take this human nature that they have and express it through their bodies and the conjugal union, through this knowing of each other. And in doing this, they this taking possession is a taking possession of their humanity that becomes re-expressed and renewed with every child, with every instance of procreation, that conception and generation of new man. And so it's a taking possession through the cycle of propagation of birth and death through history. And this entire sequence is grounded in the very mystery of creation. Did you have anything you'd like to add, Guillermo?
No, I don't.
All right. So this concept of knowledge that is defined as the conjugal union is also would want to think about as possession and love. So the question that JP2 raises here is the question whether this conjugal knowledge is equivalent to eros, which is one of the Greek words for love, and what is the relationship between knowledge and eros. Then we have an interesting um, point he makes in footnote 35, where he outlines three basic trajectories of answering these questions about knowledge and love. The first is the Platonic view, which comes from Plato, the famous Greek philosopher who was a student of Socrates and wrote many works of philosophy that are essentially the foundation of Western civilization. And for Plato, Eros is a thirst for transcendental beauty that elevates man to the divine. And this yearning for beauty then is a flight away from matter. And so we are introduced to a kind of dualism. So what dualism means, and here we'll cite the definition of the Oxford Dictionary, is that it's the division of something conceptually into two opposed or contrasted aspects, or the state of being so divided, end quote. So in the Platonic view, you have this division between what is made of matter and what is beyond matter. And Eros is this thirst for something that is beyond matters, why the word transcendental is used, because you're transcending matter into this realm of beauty, of the divine. Now, the biblical concept is a love directed towards concrete reality. And so this dualism between the spiritual, the supernatural, and what is material is absent. And then we have the contemporary view that is based on the satisfaction of drives or hedonistic enjoyment. Essentially, love is satisfying our instinct to procreate as animals, or is this something we are to enjoy because it's pleasurable? And this contemporary view really emphasizes kind of the material or matter aspect of love to the denigration of the spiritual, whereas the Platonic view is really denigrating the material or matter in favor of the spiritual. And JB2 says, no, you have to have both matter and spirit, matter and divine. And so it's focused in reality itself, taking into account both realms of being. Now, an important point that just a philosophical point to make here is that when we talk about dualism, usually people have in mind what's called Cartesian dualism. And this comes from the French philosopher Rene Descartes. And he believed that man is composed of two substances, a body and soul. So the spiritual and the physical are strictly separated within man. And our personal identity is strictly associated with the soul. So the body has nothing to do with personal identity. And we can see here that this view is quite antithetical to what we've been talking about so far in the theology of the body, especially when JP2 talks about how the body manifests and reveals the person as a sacrament. That's such a radical contrast to this view that comes from Descartes, and which we still in general accept as moderns in various ways. We see this most especially in bioethics. An interesting book on that topic is actually Patrick Lee's book. Let's see if I can remember the title. There it is. Body Self Dualism in Contemporary Ethics and Politics. So that's an interesting book if you want to look at how this Cartesian dualism has really come to undermine a lot of truths about morality and with the modern man. That's a very good resource by Patrick Lee on kind of refuting it. written by Patrick Lee and Robert P. George. Just to make a dogmatic note, the Ecumenical Council, the Council of Vienne, has dogmatically defined man to be composed of body and soul. And I take from this definition that man is a single substance, just given what the requirements are of understanding what the language behind that dogma says about how the body is the matter and the soul the form. I don't see how you can argue against a explicit single substance interpretation of that dogma. But these are important points to keep in mind in terms of kind of the philosophy and some of the philosophical statements underlying what JP2 is attacking, namely this Cartesian dualism, and in part just what does the church actually teach theologically. Let's see, Guillermo, did you have anything
Yes.
you want to add about dualism?
Not so much about dualism, but about eros. So it seems that
Okay.
in the end, eros, it's alluding to a drive that we experience. Now, that drive, of course, it's given to us by God, and it's good to distinguish these three ways that it's explained. And of course, we're going to rely on the biblical. In terms of, uh, obviously, we hear eros, we automatically think erotic, and of course there's a connection there. Here though, it's just directly related to love and based on reality.
Yeah, I will say, I think we will be coming back to this topic.
Hmm.
JP2 just introduces it, but he doesn't really explain it. Because this entire conversation about the three trajectories, he just smashed into a footnote. He raises the question, the body of the text, and then he gives a footnote with three trajectories, and that's it. There's no more details. So, given the fact that this is the second to the last audience for this chapter, he's probably going to come back to it in the future, especially when he starts talking about drives, the sex drive. All right, let's see here. Coming back then, according to scripture, this possession that we've been talking about, this possession of our humanity through offspring, is not in the manner of an object. And what that means then for us is that we have the task of reconstructing the meaning of reciprocal disinterested gift of self. And that is, again, going to be alluding more to future audiences. All right. So now JP2 wants to introduce the concept of original sin with knowledge. So knowledge and generation are they're subjected to the laws of suffering and death because of original sin. So here in Genesis 4, verse 1, we have this perspective of I acquired a man, but you have to read it in the background of the fact that Genesis 3 happened. You have the temptation of Adam and Eve. They ate the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they rebelled against God. And so now this statement of I acquired a man is within the background of fallen humanity, within the state or the situation of original sin. And so we have here the death on the horizon with this revealing of the generative meaning of the body. And when Eve is named Eve, this is now within the perspective of original sin, from within the knowledge of good and evil. When Adam's names Eve, mother of all living. And just to keep in mind, then, original sin broke the man's covenant with God, he is now cut off from God and love. And so, with this broken covenant, the mystery of life and creation become restricted, but they're not taken away. You still have birth, conception, but now you have the restrictions of death, suffering, and hereditary sinfulness. Did you have anything like to add, Guillermo?
Just to paraphrase a little bit,
Yeah.
the mystery of life and creation. Yes, JP2 says restricted. I would also want to use the verb damaged or distorted. So it's still there, but we're experiencing a twisted uh, form of it, but it's still there.
Yeah. That's an important point. It's not destroyed, it's not annihilated.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Guillermo. Especially when we start talking about how some people think human nature is destroyed in a real manner.
You think? Because I think, I don't know if they, yeah, I think you're right. Rather, I think some people think there's just no such thing as human nature.
I'm just thinking of people that follow Calvin, the
Calvin?
doctrine of total depravity.
Oh, I was thinking of something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just where this idea of man is so depraved, that he essentially lost his free will.
Yeah. Whole other topic. Very interesting topic.
Yeah. Very interesting, but certainly not Catholic.
No.
All right. Yeah. Uh, a very important bullet point is this last one here. Knowledge is a seal impressed in the original revelation of the body at the beginning of human history. And this language of a seal is very important. Guillermo, let's
Yeah.
put you on the spot. Why would this language of seal be important?
Let me read it out loud. Knowledge is a seal impressed in the original revelation of the body at the beginning of human history. It describes something permanent. So building off of what you said, that the mystery of life and creation, it's not destroyed or annihilated, but distorted. But and it's still there in the sense of our being it as masculine and feminine, the spousal meaning of the body. It never ceased to exist. It's been continued since the beginning. Now, knowledge, as now we know, it's being used in the sense of um the not exclusively the conjugal act, but in light of that fact, that knowledge in that sense presupposes the sexual love between the man and the woman. That's always going to be there. Insofar as our generation continues, the carries on instances of humanity, that revelation, it's gonna continue for as long as the human race exists. But it's been there since the beginning. Well, not but, and it's been there since the beginning.
Hmm. Are you ready for me to put you on the spot now?
Go for it. The reason why I hesitated is because I was seeing if I could paraphrase what I shared a little more, but please do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot
Yeah,
because
go
for
for it.
me, the term seal really evokes some particular imagery, namely sacramental imagery, Guillermo.
Great.
Do you know what I'm referring to?
Um, I think so. Like if you're referring to the conjugal act, then I could elaborate on that. But if it's something
I'm just,
distinct, then
what,
please go.
yeah.
Go for it.
So the question then is, what is a seal in terms of sacramental theology?
A seal in terms of, well, firstly, uh, outside of sacramental theology, a seal is something that, in a manner of speaking, confirms something that has been established and there's no going back. In light of that, once we think of sacramental theology, then when we think of seal, then what comes to mind is, say, like an indelible mark.
Exactly.
Yeah, something that demonstrates and confirms the beginning of a covenant, or the beginning of something new within that covenant. So as we know, baptism seals us as children of God. Great.
Right.
Well, what about confirmation? It's also an indelible mark. It just marks the beginning of this stage in our spiritual life, just for lack of other words, in our sacramental life, I should say.
Right. So when we talk about seal with the baptism, I'm glad you brought up this indelible mark.
Hmm.
So when the you undergo baptism, your soul has this indelible mark, a seal that states you belong to Christ, and nothing can destroy that mark. No sin can destroy that mark. It's there permanently. So when I see this statement that knowledge is a seal impressed in the revelation of the body here, I think I go back and think about this concept of a spiritual mark, because at this point, JP2 has already talked about how the body is a sacrament. And this knowledge, the conjugal union, this one flesh union, then is going to be a sacramental act. In fact, just to jump ahead slightly, marriage is a sacrament. It's one of the seven sacraments. This knowledge, then, as a seal, is implying a sacramental character. I don't want to go as far as saying that you have this indelible spiritual mark like what baptism, confirmation has, but there's something to this, that where this knowledge, this conjugal union, is a seal. There's something analogous there that I think JP2 is teasing us with here, but not
Interesting.
developing.
Interesting. And I would elaborate a little more insofar as, yeah, the conjugal act serves as a seal within the marital covenant, and it is permanent. It does describe something permanent, which, of course, uh, only one thing can destroy it: death.
Exactly. Exactly. We'll have to wait and see what
Yep.
does JP2 say about the sacramentality of marriage and the conjugal act to see where this language of seal continues. But I thought at the very least it is an important thing to note in terms of terminology. To the interested audience, you can go to the Catechism, paragraphs 12, 72, 73, and 74, where it talks about the indelible mark of baptism, and also how the Holy Spirit marks us with a seal of the Lord for our day of redemption, which is this baptism. So you do have this kind of sacramental imagery that I think he is building off of, given the fact that JP2 has already talked about the body being a sacrament. So that is something to point out. All right, thank you, Guillermo, for your patience with me messing with your head.
You're welcome.
All right. Maybe I could find something else to stump you with.
Let's see if you can.
All right. Maybe a future audience.
Great. What is this one over? Nope.
Almost. I think this is just some final last observations. Let's see here. So every man and woman, for that matter, they carry within himself or herself the mystery of, quote, beginning, end quote. And this is tied to the consciousness of the generative meaning of the body. The masculinity and femininity contain the meaning of fatherhood and motherhood. And so, or we can also say that this consciousness of the generative meaning of the body also comes into contact with a consciousness of death, the termination of our bodies. And so this conjugal knowledge so I guess an important point to know is that J2 observes then from this cycle of life, death, this knowledge and generation, that the struggle for life always overcomes death. And so life has this unwielding strength, right? It will not yield. It's unyielding. And when we talk about then, I guess, just our circumstances today, all historical men, through this conjugal knowledge, we participate and insert ourselves into the vision of God for the mystery of creation. And so despite the fact that we are in the state of original sin, we can still participate in God's vision and confirm the truth that creation is good, that life is good, and that life is fundamentally worth living and dying for. Did you have? Oops, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it
I
is.
believe it is.
I believe it is. Okay. Did you have anything you'd like to add, Guillermo?
No, I don't.
All right. In that case, thank you for watching our video. If you have been enjoying our content, please subscribe to our social media, such as YouTube. Please consider making a financial donation to us, either through PayPal or joining our Patreon. Your financial support goes towards maintaining our website and our ability to purchase new materials so we can continue making great content like these videos and our articles we have written on our website. Speaking of our website, you can check it out at nouvelesprit.com. We have many, many articles spanning all sorts of topics with a lot of Vatican II material. You can read all about that on the website. You can also discover our podcast. Guillermo, would you have to give some more information about the podcast?
Yes, we upload our podcasts onto buzzsprout.com. You can listen to us there, or you can use it to find us on your favorite podcast platform. We are on most mainstream podcasts so far, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And the link to our Buzzsprout page you can find on nouvelesprit.com.
Yeah, as Guillermo said, we have our podcast distributed on about 20 different platforms. If you want to check out all of the social media platforms we are on, including all the websites our podcast is listed on, just go to nouvelesprit.com/subscribe. The podcast is produced roughly 2 times a month. Did you have something you want to add, Guillermo?
I was going to say, yeah, that is correct. And I want to say that we mentioned that we span other topics
Oh, yeah.
besides the theology of the body.
Yeah, the podcast covers all sorts of topics. Most
Mhm.
recent was on the relationship between faith and reason.
Yes.
Or I should say
Yes.
one of the episodes was on faith and reason.
Yes, that was our most recent one. It has recently been uploaded. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, no, one thing that I'd like to point out about that episode specifically is that while the Nouvel Esprit, yes, we focused more on Vatican II, that episode, in that episode, we referred to the First Vatican Council, something that we don't hear very much about, obviously because it was a long time ago and because it was short-lived, but we do refer to it in this most recent episode 8 to be exact.
Yeah, episode 8, not our most recent. I got mixed up in my head. But with that, we'll say, or I guess, you have anything else to add, Guillermo?
I would just continue to ask our viewers and listeners to keep us and our mission in your prayers.
Yep. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Bye, everyone. God bless.